from Mendel's work, we now know that traits remain separate and that plants have two copies of the trait, say for example for flower color, and that the recessive only shows if there's no dominant, but the recessive is still there. I think that's the main thing he figured out, is the recessive is still there. It's still latent. He used the term latent. So it's still hiding there inside the genetics, the genetic code, the genotype. It's still in there. So let's explore a little bit more. What is a gene and what are the alleles? Let's go over those again. Okay, so what were we talking about? We were talking about, okay, phenotype. We need to know what phenotype is. Phenotype is the observable trait, the thing that you can see on the outside, the purple color or the lack of purple color, white. Okay, so what is genotype? Genotype are all of the alleles, whether they're expressed or not. So the latent trait that Mendel was talking about is still there. Even though it's not expressed, it's still hiding in there. So that and the dominant and the recessive are both considered the genotype. So whether they're expressed or not, whether they're visible or they're hiding. Okay, gene, we know that that's our it's a strand, it's a length of nucleotides that code for a protein, and that each chromosome has an alternative form of that gene or allele. So our allele is our alternate form of that gene. Okay, so what does all this mean in terms of our garden pea? Well, let's look back. So garden pea, it's interesting that the garden pea has, and he didn't know this at the time, Mendel didn't realize this, but the garden pea has 7 pairs of chromosomes, meaning that it has 14 chromosomes. So I'm going to go ahead and write these out. So let's say there's 1, 2, 3, and I'm making them all different. So these are all the chromosomes from the mother plant, and I'm trying to make them all kind of look different. So what do I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and let's go with something that kind of looks like that. Okay, so and then we've got the same from father as well. So we've got a total of 14 chromosomes, 1 set from mother and 1 set from father. And what's interesting about this garden pea is that each of these characteristics that Mendel chose, they're all on a different chromosome. So here is an allele for, and I'm not really sure exactly where it is on a chromosome, but it's in one place on this chromosome, so it's for seed shape. And then the characteristic seed color has the allele on a different chromosome. And then flower color happens to be on another chromosome. And pod shape happens to be on another chromosome. And pod color is on another chromosome. and flower position is on another chromosome. And then stem height is on another chromosome. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, so let's go to, that means that in this plant right here with purple flower color, there is a chromosome from mom. Oops, let's go back to red. There is a chromosome from mom, and there's a chromosome from dad, and that's going to be way too confusing, isn't it? Let me make sure. Let me erase that so I can fix that. Okay. That has an allele for flower color. So there's an allele on the mom chromosome, there's an allele on the dad chromosome. And this is for flower color. So its phenotype is purple flower color. Its genotype is these two alleles. And we use letters to represent these alleles. So in this case right here, we are using the letter A to represent flower color. So A represents this allele for the flower color. A represents this allele for flower color, and it's the same in this instance. So we know in meiosis that these are going to be split up, and chromosomes are going to be put into the gametes. So let's take a quick look at that again, just a quick review of our meiosis. So we are looking at, and I'm going to use that color right there, we are looking at an allele, let's say, that is on this chromosome right here for flower color. And let's follow where that allele goes. So it is, I'm going to say that it's in S phase, it gets replicated. So it's on these two chromosomes or homologous pairs. Okay, and so these alleles are right here and right here in prophase. So the homologous pairs get hooked up in prophase 1, and then there might be some crossing over, but in Mendel's cases, there really wasn't any crossing over. So here are our alleles in metaphase, and you can see that the alleles, how these alleles are going to be separated in anaphase, and then we kind of have to look in different directions. So our alleles are now over here on this, and over here on this chromosome, and then on these chromosomes over here. So you can see that the alleles got separated during meiosis 1, and then it separates again for meiosis 2. We now have, at the end of meiosis 2, we have 4 gametes, and each is going to have that allele. So I was using green. Okay, so here is the allele right there. Here's the allele for that one. Here's the allele for that one, and here's the allele for that one. And in this case, they were all A. So what we do is we represent the gamete for this trait in this gamete as the capital letter A. And in this case, it's all A. So let's go back and take a look. So that's what we've got right here. We've got the phenotype, we've got purple flower. Our genotype, remember, are these alleles. And for our true breeding purple flower, it's A. All of the gametes. So these right here are the gametes that this plant can produce, and they're all going to have the capital A allele for purple, for flower color. And I guess I shouldn't have used A. I should have used P. Oh, that got confusing. Okay, sorry. So I should have used P because that makes a lot more sense. So let's say, well, no, I had to use A because that's what they used. Okay, I used A. Let's stick with A. Okay, so, and that A stands for the dominant allele, purple color. Okay, so our true breeding white flower, let's take a look at that. So in that instance, we have our, this plant has the same chromosomes that has this characteristic. So let's go back. Let's say it's this one right here. So it's the homologous pair number 1 that has it. Okay, so this is homologous pair number 1 and 1. So this is for plant number 1, and this is for plant number 2. But in this case, these alleles are the recessive alleles. Now, what does that mean? So the sequence of nucleotides is a little bit different on these. And how do we get a different nucleotide sequence? Mutation. So possibly what happened is 1 or 2, it could just be 1 nucleotide is different to cause a different allele. And so this plant 2, so here we've got over here plant 1, and then we've got plant 2. This plant can only, the type of gametes that it can have are only the chromosome with that type of allele. Does that make sense? So A, it's got to have, this gamete has to have a chromosome with that allele that's mutated, that's different. And so we call that allele, actually we call that whole chromosome, actually, no, let me rephrase that. We call for this characteristic, we call that trait A. So that's why we have A gamete and A gamete. Because remember, we're just looking at one characteristic. And that is flower color. Okay, so hope you found that interesting. Next, we are going to look at how these gametes then come together in fertilization.